Got to be my back. Hey, good evening, everyone. Left you on a cliffhanger yesterday. So we were talking, those who were here yesterday or those who watched, we were discussing the question which comes up in a number of different scenarios about lighting Hanukkah candles later than what seems to be the optimum time for various reasons. Somebody comes home later, or somebody's leaving, wants to come back, somebody was traveling, etc. And we discussed a little bit. We saw the Gemara. We saw a number of reasons that might indicate that nowadays there is room to, at least in a B'diavad situation, to delay the lighting, maybe even in a Lekatchila situation as well. Very, very briefly, just to recap, we said either according to one opinion in the Gemara, according to one explanation, the Gemara does not give an upper limit in terms of how late you can start lighting. According to that reasoning, it could be whenever you want throughout the night. It could be that the Gemara gave us a time, that is the latest time you could start lighting. Maybe that's lekatchila, but not b'diavad. We said that's not the way the Rambam learns, but that's how other Rishonim learn. So that was one way of approaching it. Based on those reasons, we said it seems that b'diavad, it's not ideal, but extenuating circumstances, whatever reason, b'diavad, a person lit the candles later, you could light later with a bracha, but it extends throughout the entire night. And then we said there are other reasons which we might say that things have changed, not that things have changed all that recently, but since the Gemara, either it's changed what Tosfot writes, that originally the candles were lit outside, and therefore Pirsum Nisa took place until Tichlei Regel Min Hashuk, while you still had people walking around outside who would see the candles. Once the candles move inside, and you're lighting primarily for Bnei Abayit, for the people within the home, so Pirsum Nisa extends the entire time that those people will see it, which is until everyone goes to sleep, not Tichlei Regel Min Hashuk. That could be much later. Or we could say, what many poskim point out, that nowadays Tichlei Regel Min Hashuk is a lot later than it was in the days of the Gemara, not just that half an hour, could be later. So based on those two reasons, we'd say it would seem that maybe not just b'diavad, maybe on a more lekatchila level, it's not as problematic to delay the lighting. However, it is still constricted, still restricted by certain parameters while people are still around, while people are still awake, etc. You're going to get to later in the night, not so clear that you could still light them with a bracha. So I said, what is the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah? How do they paskin on this? That's how we ended off. We didn't give the answer. So in Siman Taf Reish Ayin Bet, which is the aptly named Siman of Zman Hadlakat Ner Chanukah, what is the time to light Chanukah candles? Sif Aleph talks about when you start lighting. Sif Bet talks about more about when you finish lighting. So it says the Shulchan Aruch, Shachach oizid v'lo idlik im shkiat hachama. So a person forgot, or a person, for whatever reason, did not light at the earlier time. Madlik v'olech ad shtichlei regel min hashuk shuk mo chatzi shah. So for that entire half an hour, what the Gemara says, ad shtichlei regel min hashuk, you can still start lighting. Then she'av ze movrim v'shavim ve'ikar persumei nisa. That's the time when you have people walking around and you still are publicizing the miracle. And he says, therefore, you need enough oil, should light for half an hour, etc. Then he continues. I'm skipping the Ramah for the moment, just to finish the Shulchan Aruch. He says, Miu, nonetheless, this is the ideal scenario. You should light in that earlier time. But if this time is passed, and a person had not lit their candles, right, after this half an hour has passed, you could light the whole night. If the night passed, you got to the next morning, you didn't light. This is not like other cases sometimes where we have tashlumin, where you could make up the mitzvah the following day. You missed it, you've missed it. But says the Shulchan Aruch, simply, but a person could light the entire night. There's no mention here of other people being awake, other people seeing it, etc. The Ramah adds on.
After midnight, wouldn't that be the following day?
No. So it's a good question. So night, halachically, so you're referring probably to the first Mishnah in Brachot. It tells us, right? When do we start? What's considered night? So night, the entire night until we get to Alot HaShachar, is still nightfall. For certain mitzvot, Chachamim made Gzera, they said you should do it before Chatzot. Why? Because if you're not going to, person's going to say they have the whole night to do something, they're going to wait and they're going to wait and wait and wait, and eventually you're going to get to the morning and you're going to lose it. So you do it before Chatzot, before nightfall. But after Chatzot, for this matter, it's still considered night. And if a person didn't, it's not recommended in any event. It's not recommended to wait until after Chatzot to light your Hanukkah candles. But if for whatever reason a person missed it, so that's still considered night. Says the Ramah, however, the Ramah adds in here. He says, Yesh Omrim, there are those who say, Shebizman hazeh shemadlik bifnim. This is before, or when the Shulchan Aruch has just told us that the ideal time is to light the first half an hour. He says, nowadays when we light inside, says Ramah, really, it seems, you don't have to be so stringent on this to make sure that you're lighting in this first half an hour. Nonetheless, he says, nonetheless, it's still better to light earlier. That's the ideal time. But says the Ramah, it's not so b'di'evet. You want to light a little bit later, you could do that. So long. Why? Because people are still going to see. The people inside your household will still see it. So the implication is that if it's after the time when everybody else has gone to sleep, seemingly not so straightforward that you could then still light. That's how the Mishnah Berurah learns in the Ramah. That's how many of the Achronim learn over here. There are those who say that nonetheless, still, even if it's late at night, I mentioned this yesterday. A person comes home late at night, everybody's gone to sleep, they haven't lit the Hanukkah candles yet. What should you do? Achronim will say, wake people up so that they can see. But assuming you can't wake people up, assuming that's going to cause Shalom Bayit issues, we know that what comes first, the Gemara tells us, right? You have now Shabbat or now Chanukah, and you only have one of them. What comes first? Shabbat, because of Shalom Bayit. So in the same way, I would think you're not going to wake people up to cause Shalom Bayit issues to light your Chanukah candles. But nonetheless, if everyone's asleep, can you light with the bracha? So many of the Achronim say you should light without a bracha. There are those who say you can still light with a bracha. And the Shara Tzion brings that if somebody does that, it's not to ein mochin biyado. We're not going to protest against it, but nonetheless, it's still not the not the ideal.
This person who's lighting.
Oh, so can you say the same when you said to the person who's lighting? So here's an interesting question. The question is, what if the household consists of only one person? Right, so that might be there seems to be more room over there to say if you're the only one, right, and that's in any event the Pesach is just going to be for you to light with the bracha. But if the Tosfot writes explicitly that once the candle's inside, that the Pesach is not just for you, but for the entire household. As we'll see in a moment, the mitzvah of Hanukkah is not the mitzvah of Ner Hanukkah. Seemingly, is not just on the individual, but it's on the household. So the other members of the household are not going to be able to see it. So that's why we have this. That's why we have this machlok. Okay. The question now becomes, what about, let's say, where a person, maybe there's something more ideal than this. So we've spoken about lighting later on. Let's say, so if somebody's going to come home at 7, 8 o'clock at night, everybody's still awake, everybody's still walking around outside, but there's no question there, you could light the candle with a bracha. But it's going to be, let's say, 11, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. It's after Chatzot, it's still night, but it's very late. Everyone's asleep. Is there a better way than getting into this machloket of lighting very, very late? So the better way might be to have somebody else light for you. And we find two scenarios the poskim discuss, whereby it's not an individual lighting by themselves, but somebody else lighting the candle, and we would still fulfill the mitzvah. So the more complicated one is going to be a shaliach, which is from outside the household. We'll get there in a moment. But the simpler one is that somebody inside the household, right? The mitzvah of Hanukkah is, Gemara tells us, Nari Shaveto, right? It's the mitzvah of the home. The Rambam, when he formulates this, he writes, mitzvah al kol bayit v'bayit. The mitzvah is on each and every household. The mitzvah is not on each and every individual per se, necessarily. So we have something unique, which means our custom, the Ashkenazi custom, because we want to fulfill the Mahadran min Mahadran, the way that we understand that is that each member of the household lights their own candles. But strictly speaking, it's not required. Strictly speaking, one person, can be the husband, can be the wife, can be whoever it is, lights the candles, and that would have fulfilled the mitzvah of the candles in that household being lit. So therefore, if the husband's coming home late from work, or the wife's coming home late from work, whatever it is, and even if they're not there at the time, but somebody who's in the home is there and has lit the candles, then that has fulfilled the mitzvah for people that are there, for whoever lives in that home, even if they're not there. An interesting question which comes up is, so therefore, what's better? Let's say one spouse is at home at 5 o'clock, which is the ideal time. The other one's only coming home at later on. Is it better to light the candles on time, or is it better to wait and then everybody light together? So again, so long as it's still within the period of time where it's reasonable to light the candles, there's strong grounds to say you can wait. If the one person's only coming home at 1 a.m, it would seem to make more sense to light earlier on, and whoever's stuck at the office is still fulfilled their mitzvah in that way. What if both members of that, or all the members of the household, are not going to be home at the time? That's what we discussed yesterday. One of the cases I mentioned, let's say a family is traveling, right? And again, there's no one at home, not the husband, not the wife, not the children, there's no one there. They're flying from the question we posed yesterday. Somebody's flying back from America, so they leave in the morning or they leave in the afternoon. By the time they get back here, it's going to be morning already. So you've missed the time period. There was no possibility of actually lighting the candles. Could you then have somebody else lighting the candles in your home for you on your behalf? So here it gets a little bit more complicated for two reasons. One is, this is not a member of the household who is lighting. This would be a shaliach. This would be somebody else. We could spend hours, we could spend months, years, talking about the shlichut and talking about which mitzvot have got shlichut and which mitzvot the shaliach can do and which shaliach can't do. Bottom line is, when it comes to Ner Chanukah, we do find the concept of a shaliach. We find discussion, and in fact, the Achronim write, it's brought in the Bach, and again, Abraham, Mishnah Berurah brings this, that if a shaliach who is not a member of the household is lighting the candles on behalf of somebody in the household, and there is no member of the household there, that they should not make a bracha. And the poskim have a big debate as to exactly what this means and which bracha should they not make. There are those who say, Shlomo Zalman Auerbach writes, that really essentially you can't have a shaliach for the mitzvah of Chanukah because the mitzvah is incumbent on the household. Somebody from the household needs to light. The person who is lighting is not from the household, they can't do it. So if they're there with somebody from the household and they're lighting, so it's, the candle's being lit and that's being done and they can say the bracha. But if nobody from the household's there, it's a little bit more questionable and therefore no bracha. That's how he understands. Others, Rav Wosner writes, no. What does it mean when we say not to say a bracha? So the shaliach can fulfill the mitzvah on your behalf. The shaliach can say the bracha, which bracha? But there's another bracha. That is a different bracha. That's a bracha that's got to do with Pirsumei Nes. That's the bracha that's got to do with actually seeing the candles being lit and experiencing part of that miracle. That's why we have also a Birkat HaRo'eh, where a situation where somebody who's not lighting and doesn't have anybody else lighting for them, they could see a candle being lit and could say the bracha. Says that's the bracha it's referring to. The shaliach wouldn't say if the balabayit's not. So there's a little bit of contention in terms of to what extent this idea of shlichut, somebody who's not from the household, and how far that goes. In our question, it goes even further because we're saying that the people who live in the household are not obligated. It's not it's not nighttime for them. So how can somebody else come and do that? But even if you say somebody can be a shaliach, can fulfill a mitzvah for somebody else on their behalf, that's when they're obligated in that mitzvah, when they are part of that. But if for them it's a different day, for where they are, it may not be Chanukah. They're on the plane and it's still the afternoon and it's not Chanukah for them yet, and for this person it is. So poskim discussed, there's no clear resolution of this, whether this can be fulfilled or not. But a possible solution might be that if nowadays when you go on these flights and you're going across time zones, so there are apps and there are websites that work it out for you. If you go into myzmanim.com, for example, people often ask, they're flying across time zones and they want to know when do they daven on the plane. So you put in your flight path on these websites and it works out for you exactly at what time it's going to be night, or it doesn't work.
You have to kind of tell where you are on the map. You can put it in what city you want to see the times for.
Okay, so I've never done this myself. I've never flown across the time zone, so I've never had this problem. But there we go. So what you could do is you could work out, and seemingly there would be a time when the person's on the plane, and a time when the person's on the plane, it's night for them where they are, and it's night as well where the house is. Even now it's going to be later. It might be 10, 11 o'clock at night. But that, in conjunction with all the other svarot that we said before, you could ask the shaliach to light at that time, and then it would be, and then they would fulfill the mitzvah on their behalf. Probably say without a bracha. Right? Again, in this tshuva that I saw that I've been working on from Eretz Chem, that they said to light without a bracha, because first of all, some poskim say the shaliach shouldn't light with a bracha at all. Second of all, it might be too late, and therefore there might be a reason not to say bracha. Third of all, the flight might be delayed. You don't know actually if the people are there and if it is night time for them or not. But at the end of the day, that's how that's how we would paskin. Have the shaliach say without the bracha, and that's the best that we can do in this scenario. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash אומר,